So I think it's fair to say that 0% AI have been absolutely awful in the previous few F1 games. I mean, just have a look at this. However, because F1 24 just came out, we need to test how bad they really are, and I'm going to try and beat them using every single tyre compound. Oh, and to make this challenge that little bit harder, I'm also going to be using a controller in this video, and well, I'll let this video do the talking.
Is around 1.5 seconds per lap quicker on the wheel compared to pad.
Genuinely, you should have seen my face when I heard that. It went from being happy hearing that this game had been made for controller players to being devastated that I was likely to be even slower than normal. However, I'm not going to let that stop me, and to start this challenge, I'm on the hard tyres here, but I still made an overtake off the line on Kevin Magnussen. And coming into turn 1, you usually try and go around the outside of cars to make overtakes, but I decided to fly up the inside of around 5 cars. And this put me up to P13, which actually means that this was a 6-car overtake, and through turn 2, I decided to be patient. This was because I knew that I could set myself up for a way better exit than the AI, and this would gain me a couple of places if I played my cards right. Thankfully, I did just that and got past Stroll and Albon, which put me into P11, and into turn 4 I just about avoided Valtteri Bottas by running really deep. And this was so I could go around the outside of him, which did not work out, and I momentarily was re-overtaken by Lance Stroll. However, I did get back past him, and then I slowly sent it up the inside of Valtteri Bottas, which for the first time put me into the top 10 of this race. And now I was fully focused on getting past Zhou Guanyu. So I did a pretty similar move on Zhou as to what I did to Bottas, however this time I made it work, and literally straight after this I was on the back of George Russell. And I just about squeezed past him, which in hindsight I'm very happy with, as the final 1.5 sectors were not easy to overtake in, as you're going to see here. So next up was Oscar Piastri, and I thought I'd use a similar tactic as before, just going deep and then around the outside. However, as you can now see, these corners are just too quick and tight to actually make moves, and I won't lie, I was already stressing about whether this challenge would actually be possible or not. But I wasn't going to let this stop me, and I started planning ahead. So I knew that for turn 14 the 0% AI would likely break, so if I could get off the power earlier than them and then get a better exit, I could make an overtake. Which is exactly what happened, and this put me into P7, and then trying to get past Lewis Hamilton, this happened. Yeah, that wasn't ideal, but I wasn't going to let this stop me from pushing on. I mean, this was recorded only 2 hours after the game was actually released. And I decided to make the best of a slightly worse situation by making a huge send around the outside of both Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton. This put me up into P5, and honestly, this massively boosted my confidence. Now it was time to make the crucial overtakes. First up of the top 5 was Fernando Alonso, who I just about avoided while squeezing past. And then I made an absolutely massive send on Sergio Perez, and I knew that I had to take risks like this if I really wanted to complete this challenge. By the way, I genuinely thought for a moment there that I was about to be switched back by the 0% AI, which may be even more embarrassing than only getting into the top 20% in the world after 500 laps of Monaco, but that's a different story. Anyway, as you just saw, I got past Lando Norris, which put me into second, and will quickly speed up to Max, who is genuinely so much quicker than everyone else in this game, which is definitely realistic, but I knew that he was going to make this challenge even harder. Obviously though, when we are both on dry tyres, I'm way quicker, so I got past him, and I thought that I was going to come into the pit lane. However, I actually decided against it. This was because I was thinking long term about tyre wear on the soft and medium tyres when it was coming to the end of the race. Moving on to the end of lap 3 here, and I've pulled an 8-second gap to Verstappen, but now it's time for probably the hardest 2 parts of this entire race. So this was trying to figure out the new pit lane and trying to drive on wet tyres on a completely dry track. So the good thing was that this new pit lane was dead simple, and I just about managed to stay under the pit limiter, and we'll quickly skip through this pit stop to go onto the lap of a wet tyre on a dry track. Yeah, unsurprisingly, this was just absolutely awful to drive. I mean, I didn't know it was actually still possible to have understeer and oversteer in the same corner, but I guess the 2012 Ferrari never really left. Anyway, moving on, we'll just run through this lap, and as you can see, I wasn't making any progress whatsoever, which was frustrating, but it was to be expected. So after this lap on wet tyres, I knew that I had to limit my losses for now, so I went straight onto a pair of fresh medium tyres, which I knew that I would be running on for a few laps. But sadly, this would eventually be swapped out for a set of intermediate tyres. But that wasn't just yet. By the start of lap 6, the AI were coming in for their only pit stop, and I knew that I had to make overtakes, and quickly, because I mean, just have a look at how far Max was out in front. So the first 2 overtakes that I made were on Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton, and I took such a wide line around turn 1, which eventually put me up into P12. And after this, I made an overtake on Lando Norris, I got past Yuki Tsunoda on the main straight along with cars who pitted, and then on the way into turn 1 I flew past Max Verstappen. Which meant that because the average pit stop lasts 30 seconds around Qatar, I had to gain 1 minute worth of lap time in 7 laps, of which one of them would be on intermediate tyres if I really wanted to complete this challenge. And then later on in the same lap I made my way past Oscar Piastri because he went into the pits. And for the first time since lap 2 I was about to get into the lead of the race, and I made a pretty easy move up the inside of Carlos Sainz. But honestly, the thing that I was more worried about was the fact that I now had to go onto intermediate tyres and I was only 12 seconds ahead of Verstappen. So we've now skipped to the end of this lap, and luckily for me I'd stretched the gap to Max by a couple more seconds. However, I knew that I would definitely be behind him leaving the pit lane. But here's where the problem started. Coming into the pit lane I was all good, but for some reason I forgot that I still had to go onto intermediates, and I momentarily chose softs. And whilst I was quickly correcting this, I stupidly clicked X, which is for turning in, and I had just cost myself a massive second. However, there was one good bit of news from this, and it was that Carlos Sainz had pitted, which meant that I would not have to overtake him whilst I was on the intermediate tyres. So leaving the pit lane I was 7.5 seconds behind Verstappen, but as we skip to the end of the lap here you can now see that I was under 5 seconds away from him. This was absolutely massive for me because I knew that on the soft tyres I would obviously be gaining so much more time. Leaving the pit lane, I had just 5 laps to gain around 35 seconds to Max, whilst I also had to overtake 11 cars just to get onto the back of him. However, I did know that this was possible, and I just had to be willing to take some serious risks. And that is exactly what I did. I was just desperate to make moves as quick as possible whilst losing as little time as possible, because I wasn't even on the main straight by the time Max was already at turn 2. However, I did know that in literally every single corner on the lap I would be gaining time on Max, because of course he is 0% AI, but I was still at a massive disadvantage when it came to timings. But with every overtake I was minimising that disadvantage that I had, and honestly knowing that you're closing in so quickly is very motivating, but I knew that this challenge was not done yet. Lap 12 was really where I made so much progress. I made some pretty simple overtakes on Norris and Hamilton. However, this overtake that you're watching now on Alonso, I had to just be so patient behind him, which was really frustrating. However, I did get the move done, and coming onto the start-finish straight with 2 laps to go, I had to gain a pretty massive 12.2 seconds if I wanted to complete this challenge, which I'd reduced by 7 seconds by the end of lap 13. This was it. I had to gain 5 seconds on Max and overtake him, but I had a minor problem, and it was that my soft tyres were absolutely destroyed, and I genuinely could notice it hurting my pace a lot, which was really starting to worry me. But I wasn't going to let this stop me, and by halfway through the lap I'd caught Max, but I'd caught him at the wrong part of the track to actually make an overtake. I honestly didn't know what to do at this point. Do I send it up his inside and pray he moves out the way, or be patient and try and make a move on the exit of a corner? Well, one thing was for sure, I would not be making a move through a corner that leans on the front tyre, because as you can see here I had absolutely zero grip and driving ability, which meant that I knew that I would have to choose to make a move on the exit of a corner. So I thought back to lap 1 where I made a move on Oscar Piastri around the outside of the penultimate corner, and I knew that I had to replicate that. I took a super wide line to set myself up for the move, and I slingshotted past Max, which put me into the lead of the race. I actually almost bottled it leaving the final corner, but I kept the car on track and successfully completed the 5 tyre compounds versus 0% AI challenge, but on F124. Thank you all so much for watching, and please subscribe. I'm so close to 10k, and trust me, you don't want to miss out on some of the content that I'm going to be putting out on this game. And by the way, if there's anything new that you'd like to see me try on F124, please do put it down in the comments below.